If we call ourselves believers, but we continually keep putting things ahead of God and in front of God and above God, more important than God, what we're actually doing is pitting God against all of these other little g gods and causing them to have to go to battle in our own life. And there's only going to be one winner.
You made it. You found one bad podcast.
Bad. Who's bad?
I suppose that would be me, Scott Heron.
Duh.
From the deep south, and I mean really deep south. So far south you have to pipe in sunshine. Alright then, let's get to it.
That's right.
Okay, whenever it comes to this issue of pitting God against other small g gods in our lives, then let's get ready to rumble, right? I mean, here we go. There was never a more enlightened group of people than the Egyptians. They were so enlightened. Acts 7:22 says that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. They were very well fed. They were fat off of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. I mean, they were so good. They knew all about warfare. They knew about sciences. They knew about the arts. They were amazing engineers. They were experts in agriculture and navigation. They built monuments that are known to this day as a wonder of the world. I mean, we're continually blown away every time we look at the pyramids themselves. They look like mountains. 2.5 million blocks of limestone. I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. Each stone weighing 2 to 5 tons each, for a total of over 6 million tons, right? So already, whenever Moses and the Egyptian slaves, the Hebrews, the Israelites, were there in slavery in Egypt, they were already 1,000 years old. And we still to this day don't know how they did it. They were also very foolish. The Egyptians had made for themselves these fashioned gods, most of them having human, from the neck down, human bodies, but animal heads or different kinds of beastly heads and faces. Some of the more popular ones are Hathor. Hathor was the sky goddess. Sometimes she's portrayed as a cow. You had Osiris, who married his sister Isis, and then his brother Set was murderous and jealous. You had Thoth. Thoth was the moon god. He was known as the recorder of the deeds of the dead. You had Anubis. Many of us have heard of Anubis, the jackal-headed god, but lots and lots more. I'm talking about bats and cats and beetles and crocodiles, all these different animals that they worshiped as gods. And that's on top of the household gods that they had in each and every home, each and every family. When I say home, I kind of mean that doubly as a family. Each and every family had its own family god that they worshipped to protect the family name, the family prosperity. Then, of course, you had all of these gods being led by Ra, who is the sun god, but also Pharaoh. See, they believed that Pharaoh, their king, was also the embodiment, the incarnate of Ra, the sun god. So they had all of these gods, and to be so enlightened and so brilliant minded in the math and sciences of their day, they were just so foolish in believing that all of these gods were real and had power. But we find that it's so prevalent in their society that it began at the womb and it ended at the tomb. They believed every aspect of their life was controlled by these man-made little g gods. And if you didn't serve them, if you messed up or you screwed up in your life and you did something stupid, or you were a criminal, or you whatever, that you would be punished by Sekhmet. He was the lion-headed punisher god, and he punished all the people who didn't serve their household gods, all of these other gods, and Ra, Pharaoh himself. Here's where the Battle Royale, the WrestleMania, comes all together into one ultimate match. You find this King Pharaoh, Ra God, being confronted by the shepherd Moses. Moses had been adopted into the royal family at one point because he had been rescued by the princess. But he made a choice to follow the Hebrew God of his people. And he served his Hebrew God. And God had told him to go approach Pharaoh and to say, let my people go. Let them out of slavery, out of bondage. Let them go. Well, when he did that, Pharaoh just laughed. It was a joke to him. Suddenly, Ra was about to be face to face with the God of the Israelites. And it was going to go down. The bell began to ring, and here comes God out of his corner. And the very first thing he does is he nails Pharaoh right between the eyes. The magicians of Pharaoh throw their rods down. They become serpents, and they come at Moses. He takes the rod of Aaron, throws it down. It becomes a serpent and consumes and eats the rods of the Egyptian magicians. So, okay, what does that mean? Well, if you'll know a little bit about Pharaoh, you know that in Egyptology, which I studied this in school, so this is real interesting to me. In Egyptology, they wore this headdress, and it had a serpent right between his eyes. So the very first thing that happens is God says, okay, he comes out of the corner swinging, and he hits Pharaoh right between the eyes with the serpent. We think about the plagues that God sent upon Pharaoh in Egypt with all of the different things, that we look at them and wonder, why would he do this? Why would he do that? He had a very specific reason why. He was confronting the little g gods of Egypt, the Nile, which was supposed to be the source of life for all Egyptians. It was supposed to, it's what gave them all of the nutrients in the ground where they were able to make their crops. Everything they believe began at the Nile. And so God says, okay, he turned the Nile into blood, made it useless. They couldn't drink it. They couldn't use it to water their crops. It was useless. Down for the count, right? The next one was the frogs. All these frogs, which they thought were a symbol of their fruitfulness, began to overrun the people. I mean, if they opened up their ovens were full of frogs. If they cut a loaf of bread to make a sandwich, they cut into frogs. If they went to their microwave had frogs in it. I mean, there were frogs everywhere. There were frogs in their hair. There were frogs under their armpits, in their pants. There were frogs everywhere. The symbol of fruitfulness. 1-2 punch, down for the count. We also see plagues of lice, gnats, flies, and boils. All of these, they affected and attacked the body, individual people. Many times we worship ourselves, and the Egyptians were no different. He came at the Egyptians where they lived. They were infested with these. And then finally, boils began to grow all over the people. They had these putrid, pus-filled boils that were popping and oozing and just attacking the health of the people just right off the bat. Okay, so there's your daily health. There's your apple a day keeps the doctor away. Down for the count. 1-2 punch. Done. Over with. The locusts came in. The locusts attacked the crops in the fields. That many of them had their faith and their trust that they were going to have a good yield that year. They didn't. They were wiped out by locusts. You had these people that just worship their animals, that worship their livestock. They put their livestock ahead of everything. And that was what they lived their life for. They were attacked by pestilence. It talks about the pestilence of livestock. All of these things. Down for the count. 1, 2, boom. It's over. Then you had hail coming down from the sky of fire, hailstones of fire that beat down into the houses and set the houses ablaze, houses burning down everywhere. People that had put their faith and their trust in their homes and in their well-being and how, their social standing of how nice their house was next to the house next to them, all flattened level where no one's house was better than anyone's house. Ra himself, we said a while ago, was the sun god. So what did God do? He turned it off. He turned off the sun. 1, 2, bam, 3, out. Down for the count. It's unbelievable. But the one that gets my attention more than anything else, the one that really causes me to stop and think and look back and take a deep breath at what God is trying to prove here, was God instructed Moses to tell the people to put lamb's blood on their doorpost. And if you put lamb's blood on your doorpost, I'll know that your household serves me. But in all of the cases in which the household served their individual protection gods, cats, beetles, crocodile, all these different little gods that were the god of the family, they didn't put any lamb's blood above their door. And the angel of death went into the house, and the firstborn of each of those households died, exposing the impotence of every household god of protection throughout the entire land. 1, 2, 3, down for the count. Boom. I mean, God does not play. So here we sit at the end of the match. In one corner, we've got Pharaoh beat up in all of his splendor and all of his pomp and all of his endless resources of an entire empire at his command. He's sitting in that corner completely, utterly powerless. Powerless, beat down and defeated by the God of the man in the other corner, who is sitting there in his despised, hated state. They couldn't stand him. He was an abomination to them. He was wearing peasant robes that were homespun in a shack in a slave quarter of an Israelite slave in Egypt. But yet he was clothed with power from on high. And as a result, God won the battle. WrestleMania with the gods was over. You had Big G God versus Little G gods. And it's still that way today, isn't it? It's still just like that. We still are faced with all the different things that we like to put ahead of our own Lord and Savior. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Big G God wants first place in our life. 40 years earlier, Moses had made a decision to follow Big G God, the Hebrew Israelite God of his people, the God that was alive and living and moving and working and calling him and giving him what he wanted him to do with his life. It's so easy to be distracted by the sparkle and the lights and the brightness of the little G tinsel and tin gods that we find that we've created for ourselves. Moses made that decision, and we've got to do the same thing.